Among the ancient ruins that have reached us across millennia, only a few Roman temples have withstood the test of time, preserving their grandeur and mysteries. These monumental structures continue to captivate researchers and travelers, offering a unique glimpse into the architectural prowess and spiritual practices of a long-lost civilization. One of the most impressive testaments to Roman architecture is the Temple of Augustus and Livia. This majestic temple, whose columns and porticos still inspire awe, was erected in Vienne, in modern-day France. It stood as a living testament to the power and divine status of imperial rule, dedicated to the sacred imperial cult that honored the great Emperor Augustus and his third wife, Livia. Today, this monumental structure is rightly considered one of the best preserved Roman temples on French soil. Construction of the temple began between 20 and 10 BCE, and it was initially dedicated solely to Augustus. However, in 41 CE, decades later, his grandson, the Roman Emperor Claudius, rededicated it to include Livia in the worship. The temple's fate underwent many changes, after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. As the lands of Gaul gradually embraced Christianity, this pagan sanctuary was transformed into the parish church of Saint Marie Lavi and served as such until the turbulent events of the French Revolution. It was then that it changed its purpose again, becoming the Temple of Reason, a symbol of a new era. However, the history of the next structure is full of mysteries and surprising twists, as it challenges conventional notions of Roman heritage. We are referring to the Temple of Garni, and its mention comes with important caveats. This architectural marvel was not built by the Romans, and there is a possibility that it was not a temple in the traditional sense at all. Moreover, its current appearance is the result of a meticulous reconstruction that revived only a shadow of its former grandeur, eroded by centuries, rather than an original structure preserved to this day. Nevertheless, its undeniable resemblance to Roman temple architecture makes it worthy of the closest attention. This temple, located in Garni, Armenia, was presumably built between 70 and 80 CE by order of King Tiridates I of Armenia. However, the exact date of its construction remains a subject of intense debate among historians and archaeologists. Some authoritative scholars put forth a bold hypothesis, suggesting that this structure might not have been a temple at all, but rather a magnificent mausoleum for one of Armenia's pro-Roman kings who lived in the 2nd century CE. This argument is supported by the striking structural similarity between the Temple of Garni and several known mausoleums located in Asia Minor. At the dawn of the 4th century, when Armenia adopted Christianity as its state religion, King Tiridates the Great initiated a decisive campaign for the systematic eradication of all ancient pagan sanctuaries located within Armenia. Nevertheless, the Temple of Garni escaped this fate, preserved through the personal plea and influence of his sister, Princess Khosrovedekt. A tragic earthquake in 1679 caused the majestic structure to collapse, after which it remained in ruins for many centuries. It was only towards the end of the 19th century that archaeological expeditions began to study this historical site. The fragments and stones of the ruined temple were carefully preserved, fostering hope for its eventual restoration. Full-scale restoration of the temple was carried out between 1969 and 1975, while Armenia was part of the Soviet Union. Today, this temple is rightly considered the only surviving pagan sanctuary in Armenia and a unique example of classical architecture that still stands in the country. Temple of Augustus in Pula. In the picturesque city of Pula, located on the coast of Croatia, stands a majestic temple dedicated to the first emperor of the Roman Empire, Augustus. An epigraphic inscription carved on the temple's facade serves as important evidence of its construction period. It reads, "To Rome and Augustus Caesar, son of the deified Julius, father of the homeland." Historians and archaeologists agree that its construction likely dates to the late 1st century BCE or the very first years of the 1st century CE. Originally, this sacred complex consisted of a triad of temples located on the bustling forum in Pula. Of these three, only the Temple of Augustus has survived to this day in its pristine condition, escaping the destructive effects of time. Nevertheless, fragments of the back wall of one of the neighboring sanctuaries can still be discerned, integrated into the architecture of the communal palace building erected in the 13th century. The temple's fate underwent significant changes. In the 4th century, during the persecution of pagan cults characteristic of the late Roman Empire, it was closed. However, during the Byzantine era, the sanctuary regained its purpose, being converted into a Christian church. Subsequently, during peaceful times, it was used for purely practical purposes, as a grain storage facility. By the end of the 19th century, the majestic structure was partially obscured by encroaching residential buildings. Unfortunately, the tragic events of World War II did not spare it. In 1944, as a result of an Allied air raid, the temple was almost completely destroyed. But by 1947, thanks to meticulous restoration work, it was recreated in the original form that stands before us today. Currently, it houses a small museum dedicated to Roman sculpture, where temporary exhibitions are also regularly held. Although its dimensions are not as grand as those of monumental temples erected in Rome or other major centers of the empire, it nevertheless remains one of the most outstanding examples of early imperial Roman temple architecture. Maison Carrée. The Maison Carrée, or square house, is an architectural gem located in the city of Nîmes, in southern France. This temple is rightly considered the best preserved Roman sanctuary outside of Rome itself. Its architectural forms serve as a classic, textbook example of how a Roman temple should be constructed, fully adhering to the canons described by the great Roman architect and theorist Vitruvius. Once upon a time, in ancient Rome, a magnificent structure was erected dedicated to Gaius and Lucius Caesar. These young men, being the adopted sons of Augustus himself, were considered the most likely contenders for the imperial throne, potential successors to the great ruler. However, their fate was tragic, both passed away prematurely at a young age. It is believed that the construction of this temple began around 19 BCE, and the initiator of its construction was none other than the biological father of Gaius and Lucius, the distinguished general and statesman Marcus Agrippa. After the Roman Empire experienced its decline, this building remarkably continued to serve various purposes for many centuries. It underwent numerous transformations, converting from a sanctuary to a Christian church, then to a town hall, a repository for important documents, an archive, and even, astonishingly, a stable, until it finally found its current purpose as a museum in 1823. Temple of Hercules Victor. In the Eternal City, at the very heart of the Roman Empire, stands an ancient temple celebrating the great Hercules Victor. It was erected in the historic Forum Boarium, known as the Cattle Forum, in close proximity to the picturesque banks of the Tiber River, as early as the 2nd century BCE. This structure is rightly considered one of the oldest architectural monuments in Rome that has survived to this day. A distinguishing feature of the temple is its unique circular plan. A central cylindrical stone block is surrounded by 20 elegant Corinthian columns, giving the structure a majestic and harmonious appearance. According to ancient traditions, it was here, on this sacred spot, that the mighty Hercules found rest and repose after completing his 10th legendary labor. For many years, due to its distinctive circular shape, this structure was mistakenly identified as a temple dedicated to the Vestal Virgins. However, in the early 19th century, thanks to the astuteness of Rome's prefect, appointed by Napoleon, the true purpose of the structure was established, and it was correctly identified. Near the Temple of Hercules Victor stands a structure known as the Temple of Portunus. This ancient sanctuary, dating back to the 2nd or 1st century BCE, is rightly considered one of Rome's oldest architectural monuments. Dedicated to Portunus, the deity who protected livestock and harbors, its location on the banks of the Tiber River, right within Rome's old cattle market, seems entirely fitting and logical. Annually, on August 17th, the Portunalia festival was solemnly celebrated within its walls. Notably, the Temple of Portunus has survived to this day in excellent condition. Its remarkable preservation is largely due to the fact that in 872 CE, this ancient structure was reconsecrated and transformed into a Christian shrine dedicated to Saint Mary of Egypt, which ensured its protection and careful treatment throughout the centuries. Along with the Temple of Hercules in the Forum Boarium, the Temple of Portunus is an outstanding example of Roman Republican architecture, showcasing its finest characteristics. It is believed that the temple located in Baalbek, Lebanon, was dedicated to the god of wine, Bacchus. Its construction was presumably commissioned by Emperor Antoninus Pius sometime during his reign, specifically from 138 to 161 CE. This majestic structure, however, was not used for its original cultic purpose for an extended period. Its functioning as a pagan sanctuary likely ceased around the 4th century CE, when the Roman Empire began active persecutions of ancient polytheistic religions. There is also a hypothesis that in later times it might have become part of Baalbek's medieval fortifications. The first systematic archaeological excavations at this site were carried out by a German expedition between 1898 and 1903. Subsequently, in 1920, the Lebanese government initiated extensive work for its restoration and partial reconstruction. One of the most notable features of this temple is its ornamentation. It is adorned with some of the most exquisite and well-preserved reliefs that have come down to us from antiquity. Among the majestic architectural monuments of antiquity, the Pantheon stands out as the most exquisitely preserved structure of ancient Rome, having survived through the centuries. Its history is full of dramatic events and repeated revivals. The original version of this temple, conceived by the distinguished statesman Marcus Agrippa, dates back to 27 BCE. Unfortunately, this first incarnation was irrevocably lost due to a devastating fire that occurred in 80 CE. The second version, built during the reign of Emperor Domitian, met a no less tragic fate. In 110 CE, it was struck by lightning, leading to its complete destruction by fire. The current, familiar structure was finally completed during the reign of Emperor Hadrian, approximately by 125 CE, although many historians believe that extensive construction work had already begun under his predecessor, Trajan. According to established tradition, the Pantheon was conceived and designed as a universal temple, dedicated to all Roman gods, which is reflected in its name, derived from the Greek roots pan, meaning all, and theos, which translates to gods. Nevertheless, historians have not been able to find evidence of any cult dedicated to absolutely all deities in ancient Rome, which calls into question its original purpose and leaves its precise function shrouded in mystery to this day. It is well known that Emperor Hadrian regularly used this majestic structure for Senate meetings, indicating its versatility. Moreover, the famous 1st-century writer Pliny the Elder claimed that inside the Pantheon once stood statues of important deities such as Venus and Mars, as well as the deified Julius Caesar, emphasizing its sacred and commemorative significance. The exceptional preservation of the building, astonishing to researchers and tourists alike, is likely due to the fact that at a relatively early stage of its long history, specifically in 608 CE, it was repurposed and transformed into a Christian church, St. Mary of the Martyrs. In subsequent centuries, in 1270, a bell tower was added to its majestic portico. However, this architectural feature was later dismantled. The Pantheon likely represents one of the first structures in the classical architectural tradition where the interior space was deliberately designed to surpass the exterior in magnificence. Visitors entered this majestic rotunda by passing through massive bronze gates. The interior space of the rotunda is striking in its dimensions. Its diameter reaches 43.2 meters, 141.7 feet. This impressive size remarkably matches the maximum height of the dome itself, which is a perfect hemisphere, creating a sense of perfect harmony. At the very top of this grand dome is a unique opening facing the heavens, known as the oculus. Its diameter is 8.8 meters, and it is framed by an elegant decorative bronze frieze, serving not only as a source of light but also as a symbol of connection to the outside world. Beyond its original purpose, the Pantheon served for many decades as a mausoleum for the Italian monarchy, from 1870 until 1946. Among other distinguished burials, the tomb of the great Renaissance artist, Raphael, holds a special place here. For modern visitors, a visit to this ancient temple is more than just sightseeing. It is an almost tangible journey through the centuries, offering a unique opportunity to witness firsthand the unparalleled grandeur of ancient Rome at its zenith.